For the people on the Zoom, can you hear this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thumbs ups are good. Thank you.
So I think we're nearly ready then.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education's Educator Diversity Committee. I am Mary Ann Stewart. I'm the chair of the committee, and I want to thank you all so much for making the time both in person and online to be here and be part of this conversation. I would like to have my colleagues who are online to go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Dalida.
Dalida Hasha, Worcester.
Sweet. Thank you, Dalida. We will be joined by other members of the committee at some point during this process, during this meeting. So,
Erica's on, Chairwoman.
is she on?
Yes.
Hello, Erica Fisher, Worcester. I'm going to have my camera off for much of this.
I see. Okay, welcome, Erica. Thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you making the time. So today's meeting is intentionally designed as an opportunity for the committee to listen. Our charge is oversight, but I think oversight only has integrity when it's grounded in lived experience. So this afternoon, we're centering practitioner-rooted voices and community-rooted perspectives, hearing from people who can speak directly to what belonging feels like, what retention requires, and what authentic stakeholder engagement looks like on the ground. We've invited speakers from the Teachers Lounge, from the Association of Multilingual and Multicultural Educators, hereafter referred to as AMSEL, the State Student Advisory Council, or SSAC, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, MTA, and American Federation of Teachers Massachusetts, or the AFT-MAS. And each group brings a distinct vantage point, and together they offer a fuller picture of how educator diversity is experienced by educators, students, families, multilingual communities, and the unions that advocate for them. As they share their insights today, I want to begin by naming our gratitude. Your time, your expertise, and your candor are essential to this committee's work. We're here to learn from you about the conditions that help educators of color stay and lead, about the pathways and barriers multilingual educators navigate, about how students experience representation and connection, and about the policy shifts that would make a meaningful difference. And after each presentation, committee members will have an opportunity to ask questions, and we can engage in a brief discussion. And we'll also reserve some time at the end of the meeting to reflect on themes and identify what follow-up might be needed as we continue this work. I also note that I've asked Helene to keep a timer, and that will keep us on track since we have so many people today to hear from and to move us along. So again, with that, I just want to say thank you again for being here and for the work that you all do every day. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite members of the Teachers Lounge at this point to please come up to this table here. Do we have everybody? Christian Santos, Marissa Taylor, Michelle Simon, and Devin Yerhatz. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Awesome. Afternoon, all. My name is Devin Morris. I'm the co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit called the Teachers Lounge. We do work to recruit, revitalize, and retain educators of color across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I wear a few other hats I think worthy of note as well. I am a member of the steering committee for the Educator Diversity Act. I'm the chair of education for the NAACP New England Area Conference, as well as the education chair for the Commission on Black Men and Boys for the City of Boston. But today, I think the other role, in addition to the TTL work hat that I'm wearing today, is the co-founder and president of the Elevating Educators Coalition, which I want to talk to you briefly about to set some context. So before I introduce you to and turn things over to these three incredible educators, some really quick context. You know we have a leaky pipeline. You know that we lack diversity. And as much as we have a systems problem, a skill and will gap relative to recruitment and retention, and as much as we are losing DEI directors who have been champions of teacher diversity work across the Commonwealth, we also have a marketing and comms problem that needs to be addressed. The value proposition for teaching is off and hasn't evolved in many, many years. The roadmap is unclear to many, both inside and outside of the profession. And despite a clear DESE rubric, there isn't differentiation for excellence in teaching and the support to make it so at the various levels of teacher development and experience. What excellence looks like for a second-year teacher is vastly different than what it looks like for a 15-year vet. And so enter the Elevating Educators Coalition. We are 10 teacher-serving organizations operating across 4 stages of teacher development: explore, prepare, develop, and lead. Members include the Teachers Lounge, Boston Plan for Excellence, Latinos for Education, Teach Plus, Teach for America, Massachusetts, Lynch Leadership Academy, He Is Me Institute, Educators for Excellence, and Breakthrough Greater Boston. We operate to bring back the reverence for the teaching profession, create clear pathways and trusted handoffs for teachers across our respective programs and across those 4 stages that we named towards sustainability. As part of building a portrait of an excellent teacher, or poet as we call it, we conducted focus groups with classroom educators and school leaders to identify the conditions necessary to teach effectively and to sustain in the profession, the systems necessary to uphold those conditions in support of teachers, and the leadership traits necessary to uphold those systems. We've had garnered support from the Bar Foundation. We've written a proposal to the Lieutenant Governor and Secretary Zreich, and we're eager to work with more partners towards a more diverse, talented, and sustainable teacher workforce for all of our babies. And so these 3 incredible educators that you're about to hear from are our 2026 recipients of the A Beautiful Resistance Award for Excellence in Teaching and Leadership. They are very familiar with the work that we're doing, but we very intentionally asked them to speak to their own experiences and perspectives today, perspectives that deserve to be oversampled in research, perspectives that should be driving policy. They are teachers and leaders. They are charter and in district, seasoned and early career, all leaders in their own right. And I'm excited for you to meet them all today, and we're also happy to answer any follow-up questions that you have at the end. And so with that, I'll turn things over to Christian Santos.
Hopefully you guys can hear me fine. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the chair, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, the commissioner, and all others who've helped bring us together today to address the importance of educator diversity. My name is Christian Santos, and as Devin, I also wear many hats, some stylish. I am a father, an educator, an impact leader for Profound Gentlemen, a nonprofit built to sustain and retain male educators of color across the United States. A Teach for America alumni, a head football and track coach, a Harvard Grad School of Education supervising practitioner, and now a proud member of the Teachers Lounge. Now, these roles have shaped my unique perspective over the past 6 years in education. And oftentimes I wrestle with the imposter syndrome when reflecting on my influence that I now have, because without key educators of color stepping into pivotal moments within my own educational journey, I would not be sitting here before you today. Now, I never planned to become an educator. So I did not take any educational courses in college, nor did I envision myself in a classroom. But everything changed when my professor, Josephine Wright, pulled me aside as I submitted my final paper in college, and she said, "Christian, we need more male educators of color like you. Give it a thought." And at that time, she may not have realized the impact of her words, but she planted a seed. And while the world seemed to come to a halt during COVID, that seed began to grow for me. Through Teach for America, my career in education began to bloom, and with it became a deeper understanding of just how transformative representation, encouragement, and belief can be in the life of a young person. My experience is only one example of how educator diversity shapes trajectories, not just for students, but for those who ultimately choose to serve in education as well. Now, this is not anecdotal. A growing body of research consistently shows that students benefit both academically and socially when they are taught by educators who reflect their identities. Now, teachers of color are more likely to hold high expectations for students of color, as I do my own, and to recognize their academic potential early and accurately. At the same time, persistent disparities in perception and discipline remain evident, with studies showing that students of color are more likely to experience disproportionate disciplinary outcomes in classrooms where they are underrepresented. Now, as a father, this is not abstract for me. It is deeply personal. I know what it means to want assurance that your child is in a safe, affirming environment, one where their culture is not misunderstood, minimized, or misinterpreted, but instead seen, valued, and celebrated. These realities matter because they directly shape opportunity, access, and long-term outcomes. Educated diversity is therefore not simply about representation just for the sake of it. It is about equity, belonging, and ensuring that every scholar is seen, supported, and held to high expectations. Now, if we are serious about diversifying scholar experiences in the classroom, then we must move beyond recruitment alone and commit to the sustained work required to retain educators of color. This is where the enforcement of the Educator Diversity Act becomes essential. The Act advances critical initiatives, including expanding alternative pathways to certification, one that I know many of my gentlemen have benefited from, increasing data transparency and better tracking of address educator workforce diversity across districts, improving consistency in hiring practices to support candidates from underrepresented backgrounds, one of my own, being from Philadelphia, establishing educator diversity councils to advise school committees and district leaders on issues of equity and inclusion. Now, as I named, as someone born and raised in Philadelphia, a major reason why I chose to build my life here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is because of the opportunities I want my children to have throughout their educational journey. I want them to experience the same access to a diverse range of educators that shaped my own path. By fully committing to this vision and implementation of the Educator Diversity Act, we take a meaningful step toward better serving all families. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today to speak on behalf of the Educator Diversity Act. My name is Michelle Simon, and I'm honored to speak today about the need to create conditions where educators of color can stay, thrive, and lead across the Commonwealth schools. I stand before you today as a first-generation college graduate, a mother, an educator, a school leader, and a lifelong learner. I'm also here today as someone who has entered this profession through a non-traditional educator pathway, an experience that expanded access and opportunity for me as an aspiring educator and leader after beginning my career in the financial industry. The Teach Next Year program accelerated my transition into education by validating my existing professional strengths while providing the targeted mentorship, classroom experiences, and leadership development necessary for necessary impact. It offered a pathway that might not have been accessible to me and helped transform my commitment to children and the communities into a long career in public education. I also stand as evidence of what's possible when talented professionals are provided with meaningful opportunities, mentorship, and alternative pathways into the profession. That experience reinforced for me how important it is that we continue creating multiple pathways for educators of color, particularly for those who may face financial, systemic, or institutional barriers to traditional prep programs. I'm here also as someone who continues to experience both the power and the burden of leading within systems that were not historically designed with educators of color in mind. Too often, conversations about educator diversity focus on recruitment, but recruitment without a plan for retention becomes a revolving door. Retention without the conditions to thrive within these spaces becomes survival. The educators I know, and the educators reflected in the Elevating Educators focus groups, are not leaving because they don't care about students. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Many, like myself, stay because of the deep relationships with students and the communities in which they serve, a commitment to equity, and a belief that every child deserves excellent education. What pushes educators out are the conditions surrounding the work. There are several conditions that educators of color need to teach and remain in the profession, including professional trust and autonomy, collaboration and supportive leadership, mentorship, planning and collaborative time for educators, flexibility with work-life sustainability, opportunities for leadership, and school cultures, where educators feel respected, valued, and heard. These conditions are not extras, but they're real retention strategies that honor the wholeness of our educators to be sustained in this work. Educators of color in particular often carry the invisible labor within schools. We are frequently expected to mentor others, support students through racialized experiences, lead equity conversations, bridge relationships with families and communities, and help institutions respond during moments of crisis. And yet, many educators of color simultaneously experience heightened scrutiny, isolation, and barriers to advance leadership. We also need to acknowledge that the systemic instability many educators of color experience within school systems, because these educators are often newer to the profession due to barriers to entry, they are also frequently among the last hired and the first impacted during staffing instability and staffing reductions. This creates a painful cycle where districts celebrate gains in recruitment while also losing the very educators they worked hard to bring into the profession. Diversity efforts cannot succeed if educators of color experience themselves as the last protected and the least protected members on the workforce. If we're serious about educator diversity, then retention protections and equitable staffing policies must be a part of this conversation. I encourage the board to consider several policy shifts and supports. First, invest in intentional mentorship and leadership pipelines for educators of color, including affinity spaces, sponsorships into leadership roles, and educator diversity councils where educators have a formal voice in shaping policies. Second, expand multiple pathways into the profession, including paid teacher apprenticeships, cost-free or low-cost certification supports, and pathways that reduce unnecessary barriers while maintaining high standards. Third, please require districts to track and publicly report not only the hiring data, but the retention, the promotion, and the turnover rate for educators of color. Fourth, examine how staffing policies and reduction in forced practices may disproportionately impact early career educators of color. Fifth, invest in school leadership development focused on professional trust, anti-bias, leadership, collaboration, culturally responsive practices, and workplace belonging. And finally, I ask that you recognize that educators stay in environments where they are treated as professionals, where their expertise is valued, where they are trusted to lead, and where organizational commitment to equity are reflected not only in the language, but also in daily practice. Communities benefit from diverse educators. We do not only need representation, but we also need educators who feel supported enough to remain in the work. The Educator Diversity Act matters because it acknowledges that this issue is not simply about recruitment pipelines. It is also about access. It is about sustainability, about leadership, belonging, and systemic change. Educators of color should not have to choose between their purpose and their peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. While I do not claim to speak for all educators of color in Boston or across Massachusetts, I am honored and humbled to share my personal perspective on the impact of the Educator Diversity Act and the importance of engaging key stakeholders in this work. My name is Marissa Taylor. I'm currently a high school humanities teacher at Edward Brook Charter Schools. As a queer Black woman, a proud graduate of Norwood Public Schools, with a BA from Fairfield University and a master's degree from Emmanuel College, completed at no cost to me, my 16 years in education have been both a battle and a series of triumphs. It was through a partnership between Emmanuel College and the Sisters of Notre Dame, who supported the AmeriCorps-based school where I worked, Mother Caroline Academy, that I was able to complete my initial licensure and have my MTELs covered within the first 2 years of my teaching career. None of that would have been possible without the mentorship of my principal at the time, Michelle Albert, a Black woman who guided us through how to leverage these interconnected programs to access both free education and our teaching licenses. Without her, I would not be standing or sitting here before you today. And to be candid, teaching was not my original path either. I wanted to be Janet Jackson's background dancer, and if that didn't work out, a lawyer like my mother. but growing up and pursuing my education within predominantly white institutions placed me again and again in roles of mentor, tutor, camp counselor, advocator, where the teacher within me was formed. Those experiences led me to ask, who is going to be who you needed? Who will be there to protect, uplift, and inspire the next generation of students of color, and especially queer students of color, so that they can see they can become anything they want despite the systemic racism embedded in our schools and universities. When the stars aligned at Mother Caroline Academy, I answered that calling. I share this context to make one thing clear. No educator of color has a singular story. Inviting just a few of us to weigh in on the enactment, rollout, and execution of the Educator Diversity Act cannot be the only move this board makes. There must be a concerted, sustained effort to reach educators across all regions of Massachusetts, to gather meaningful data on what educators of color need not to just survive, but to truly thrive in a system that has historically worked to exclude us and dismiss our lived experiences as unreliable and not valid. As teachers, we are never permitted to rely on a singular strategy to deliver instruction. We are expected to apply multiple approaches within one lesson and to repeat that across units, quarters, semesters, and entire school years. BESE must hold itself to the same standard when implementing the Educator Diversity Act, delivering its requirements through multiple avenues and doing so with fidelity. So with that in mind, I offer these recommendations. Learn from the existing diversity initiatives. Engage districts and schools that have already been implementing DEI practices, whether those efforts are thriving or struggling, because both will yield valuable action steps to ensure that the Educator Diversity Act is carried out as envisioned. Listen to school leaders. Ask them directly what skills or tools they feel are missing in order to effectively recruit, retain, and develop teachers of color, and pay them for their expertise. Elevate thriving educators of color. Gather perspectives from educators of color who are succeeding and satisfied in their roles to understand what their school systems are doing right, and pay them for their expertise. Harness the power of community. Create regularly scheduled forums, both in person and virtual, where teachers and leaders of color can share what is working and what still needs improvement. And last, require accountability from school leaders. Make it a formal expectation that school leaders disseminate these policies clearly and consistently with their staff. The overarching message is this: ask as many educators of color as you can, as often as you can, about their experiences and how this board can best support their growth, whether they aspire to remain in the classroom or to one day lead a school. Additionally, report out those findings from these conversations and financially compensate these educators of color in a time for their time, insight, and expertise. Thank you for listening and for fully engaging in this diversity work at a time where it feels like it is dismantled or being villainized to do so.
Thank you, Christian and Marissa, Michelle, Devin. I would like to turn to my colleagues, Dalida and Erica, to see if there's any follow-up, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Marianne. Want to thank folks for their testimony. And I have a question. And I heard a little bit about the sort of like the teachers handoff when it comes to preparing teachers, educators, I should say. Can I have a little bit of can someone elaborate what does the handoff usually look like?
Sure. So we have a number of folks, and I'm actually sure that even some of the folks here today could speak to this, which is many of us who survive and thrive in the profession do so because we have mentors. You heard a few folks talk about how it took a mentor or guide at some point to make someone even see their own potential in the profession. And so the same is true in terms of growth and sustainability. And so many would cite that there was no formal system that ensured that that was possible. And so what we learned as a number of 10 organizations who have traditionally worked in silos for so many years in service of teachers, but recognizing how many educators traverse our respective programs, we started to look at what would it look like if there were more trusted handoffs across programs. And so there are a number of organizations who work in the explore phase. That's your Breakthrough Greater Boston, your City Year, as examples of member organizations who work to recruit folks into the profession. once you graduate, it's not guaranteed that you are going to go into the profession. So then you look at your teacher prep programs, your TFAs, your Boston Teacher Residency, among others, to say, what does it look like? We just hosted our very first event of this nature. What would it look like if we brought in participants and graduates and alumni and career changers, college students, high school students into an event to then talk about what the roadmap looks like ahead of you before it is even time for you to figure out the next step. And so those organizations who operate at those two stages came together, amongst the others as well, but to create a trusted handoff for that demographic of educators and prospective educators. And so that goal being that we're going to do more of that over the course of the year to talk about trusted handoffs from our respective programs, to not just think about the successful completion of our program. We know this is working with students. It is not, anyone who works with high school students, high school graduation is just a starting point and a step along their journey. It's not the end all be all. So you have not been successful as a high school principal, as a high school teacher, if that's the last checkpoint you have with that student. What does post-secondary success look like? What does well-being look like? And so the same thing needs to be true for our teachers, is not just thinking about completion of programs, but what does sustainability in the profession look like?
Great, thank you. Anything else? I think that's so important. Thank you for raising that. That's great. Are we ready to move on? I think so. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Marianne. And thank you all.
Thank you. So I'd like to call up AMCEL, please, representatives from AMCEL. Today we have Jorge Allen and Laura Assad and Manuel Fernandez. Thank you so much. I'll give you a minute to get settled. Very interested in hearing your perspective and what you'll share with us today.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us to be here and our other colleagues. This is very, very important, and I think that what happens after this meeting is more important than what happens during this meeting. And I'll make that point a little later, a little more specifically. My name is Manuel J. Fernandez. I am the president of the Association of Massachusetts School Equity Leaders, and I'm also the assistant superintendent of secondary schools and chief equity officer for Cambridge Public Schools.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Assad. I serve as the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement for Salem Public Schools. I also am on a number of boards, and I'm here as a representative of AMCEL, but I also have children that are school age, and I am a proud graduate of Salem Public Schools. Thank you for having us here.
Hi, my name is Jorge Allen. I'm the current DEI director for Wesley Public Schools, and I'm a member of AMCEL. And similar to what Laura has said, active member in other organizations, including MATSOL and previously also with MAFLA. My personal experience, similar to Laura, I'm a proud parent of 3 African American Hispanic boys in the state, and 2 of them are exploring the education profession. One working in a charter school as a long-term sub, and another one just doing per diem sub just right after graduation.
Nice, thank you.
AMCEL was established in 2022 in response to the growing number of DEI offices being installed in school districts across the state of Massachusetts. And we had been meeting informally for a very long time, more to provide companionship and support and networking for some of our members, they often are the only person of color in their community. And so this was an opportunity to get a deposit, as we say, and to hug each other up and to be supportive of each other on a regular basis. We then realized that we had a deeper obligation, not just to ourselves, but to the educators across this state, as well as the children across the state that would benefit from whatever we could develop as a unit. Our membership has been impacted severely over the last few years. When we started, we had over 50 members. We are now hovering between 30 and 40 members, depending on the year, because districts are closing DEI offices in the name of funding, but we also know it's in the name of other things too. See, I will retire in June, this month, on the 30th. I won't say how many years, but I know what mimeograph ink smells like, okay? I will tell you this, that when I started, we talked about multicultural. We talked about words that are antiquated today. Equity was about money. We didn't use words like inclusion and belonging. The words have changed, but in many ways, we are back to where we used to be. And in many cases, worse than we used to be when I first started in this profession. And it worries me and it scares me that the progress that I've seen go on in my career in one fell swoop is practically gone. And building it back is going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take a lot of compassion. It's going to take a lot of insight. And more than anything else, and I'll pass it off to Laura with this, we use the word equity a lot. Probably not in any other state, but we definitely use it in this state. And you can't use it in some places because people get offended and think you're coming after them. We still use it, and we will continue to use it. But I want to be clear what equity means from my perspective. If you're saying we're about equity, if Desi, and I'm proud of the work that you've been doing in the past few years and moving ahead, and in the letter that should be coming out in a few months, maybe a few weeks, that puts the Educator Diversity Act in place with DEI offices in every community and equity teams where there are not offices. But when we start talking about equity, we need to understand that in IMSA, we view equity as a verb. If it ain't moving, it ain't happening. When you are a target of an inequity, you feel it. You do not respond without movement. And so equity needs to be moving, it needs to be actionable, it needs to be transformative, it needs to be changing things. And I hope that we will continue to collaborate with our partners in this room, as well as hopefully with Desi, to make sure that equity is a verb. For whatever reason, it's not clicking, or maybe I don't have it on. I might not have turned it on. Okay. There we go. Nope.
Okay. I can continue.
That's okay. She can continue.
So we wanted to speak a little bit about how we're supporting multilingual educators, students, and families. I can speak for Salem. We do a lot of work through grants and other opportunities that we create. As you all know, Salem Public Schools is in the North Shore. A lot of programming and a lot of opportunities that happen across the state. We feel it significantly because they're focused on the population in Boston, and beyond. So when we have to be really strategic in the work that we do, not only in supporting the multilingual educators that we currently have, but the ones that we're trying to grow. We look at opportunities through the teacher diversification grants that have been offered, and we have done intentional work in looking outside of the country, really, to support our recruitment and recruitment efforts. One of the projects we work on is recruiting teachers from the Dominican Republic. And while we also participate in programs like the one that Desi offers with uh, teachers from Spain. We benefit from that. However, one of our asks is for the department to consider expanding to other countries. We don't have students from Spain, and while we love and have benefited highly from having teachers from other countries, we find that we want to be able to expand to other countries to then continue the recruitment and retention process through different programs so that our students can see themselves in these professions. We also find that there are challenges even through our Grow Our Own programs where we try to engage with our current educators. Our pool of educators of color fall within the paraprofessionals and our service and facilities professionals. And while we know that a lot of our multilingual, whether they are immigrant or not, they are coming with gifts and degrees from foreign countries, and the state is a barrier when it comes to equivalency exams. And whether those equivalency exams are provided in another language, or some of the requirements or degrees or other standards that they're coming with, they're not always seen or recognized here in the state. And it makes it really hard for someone who is already a teacher in another country to participate or pursue teaching here in Massachusetts. So for us in Salem, we are tapping into our pathway programs. We support with, where we are recipients of the RTAP grant. And even with those opportunities, we are asking educators to go from working full-time to potentially receiving a pay cut to then take more time to go back to school and create further burdens. So the programs that are available and are coming up, they benefit a certain population, and that usually tends to work for students who we're trying to tap into that are interested at post-graduation to pursue their education career. Some of our adult educators who have been with us in the district for a period of time are struggling to figure out how they're going to make ends meet when they have to already work multiple jobs, and the growing prices of everything to maintain a steady lifestyle. Um, Part of what we also do in Salem is we support parents to be able to become either paraprofessionals or have some sort of access to the education or to education within public schools. But what that looks like in terms of like stakeholder engagement, um, for parents, we don't tell parents what to do or what decisions we make. We work with them. We see them as partners. We have established, as any other district, English language parent advisory councils, but we've gone beyond. Our former superintendent, who is now the Secretary of Education, had established over the years a superintendent parent advisory council, a teacher advisory council, and our CPAC for Special Education Advisory Council, we have started a Spanish language one. But that happens through partnerships with families and other organizations like Latinos for Education, and our local nonprofits. So we've gone, again, I had mentioned it is rare that we get educators of color that come from Boston. So we have to be really strategic about how we are utilizing the gifts and the gifted people that we already have in the district, and work with our partners to either have our families have leadership opportunities within the district, have opportunities for employment within our district, to see themselves be within our district long term because they live within our community, they are committed, they want to stay with us long term, and thinking about any possible way for us to retain them through that process. And that is all through authentic engagement. I agree, and what was said before with members of the Teachers Lounge, that mentorship is key. and advocate for the work to be distributed evenly across, as evenly as possible across districts. So advocating for the work not just to fall under one person, and often, and what Manuel has shared, that it often falls under the roles of the DEI personnel. And in our district, it's me, it's one person. And if there isn't an opportunity to hire more individuals to do this work, then what funding is available to expand on this opportunity, whether it is to stipends staff members in Salem or in other small districts like Salem, to be able to do this work, expand it, and do it authentically in a way that could be sustainable year after year, and not just have it be educators of color that's doing this work, but to make it so that it's a full district effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, if you can. Next slide. Hello, Ruth Ortiz Collazo. Your ELAR 1.0 application for academic teacher foreign language, Spanish, pre-K 6, provisional, has been approved and license issued. Congratulations on earning an educator credential in Massachusetts. You have worked diligently toward this goal, and it is educators like you who help to enhance the quality of education in the Commonwealth. I just want to appreciate what this board listened to Ruth Ortiz's testimony last month in the same session when this board approved unanimously the alternative pathways for licensure, and I'm pleased to share with this board that Ruth has received this letter that I just read. And I guess my message in my section is going to be, how can we make Ruth not just an exception, but one of many? Next slide. So I'm going to offer, basically three barriers that we see, and maybe three possible policy shifts. They are kind of tweaks, but the aggregation of a lot of these tweaks are the ones that will make licensure in this profession accessible to a greater number of applicants. First, I had to admit that MTEL has been the single most consistent barrier I have seen in 14 years. Not a measure of teaching capacity, but a filter that removes multilingual and Latinx candidates before districts ever evaluate them. Bruce's case proved it, but it currently depends on individual districts knowing how to use it. Her case required a coordinated effort among district leaders to navigate, and especially I want to highlight what Manuel has mentioned about our role as AMSEL members. And so Laura has explained that as DEI directors in our districts, we tend to be that connector between different stakeholders in our districts. In the case of Ruth, my role is the one that actually brought the employer, Ruth in this case, her department head, and also the English-speaking only HR department that we have in our district. So this is what authentic engagement looks like in practice. This is what equity as a verb, as Manuel mentioned, is. It's not a survey, it's not a forum, but school equity leaders making calls that keep an aspiring multilingual educator from falling through the cracks. Third, in suburban districts like Wesley, multilingual educators are hired into education support professional roles, UNIC, and we have been mentioning this in the area of paraprofessionals. But rarely in places like Wesley are they sponsored into classroom teaching positions due to the MTEL requirements. So what would meaningfully changing this look like? So these are the three little tweaks that I would like to suggest here. One is to develop a DESI issue Educator Diversity Alternative Pathway Playbook that names the roles required at the district level. For example, a DI director as a connector, content or supervisors as the support or sponsors, and the HR department as the compliance partner in the districts to avoid having to engineer this coordination from scratch each time, as it happened in the case of Ruth in my district. Second, to create maybe a preliminary teaching license for bilingual or multilingual UNIC paraprofessional staff transitioning into classroom teaching positions. This provisional license to be valid for 2 years, so that when these aspiring educators can then qualify to the 2-year in the role pathway that this board just approved last month, that will allow someone to be exempt or fulfill the literacy MTEL. And then that's just a way to kind of like close that gap. 3, provide model language to encourage districts to use the silo biliteracy as a mitigating circumstance in the reduction in force process. As our colleague from Teacher Lounge have mentioned, and is well known in the state, I mean, the last ones to be hired are the first ones to be fired. Mm-hmm. So when a district is going through that RIF process, if we could provide that language that could allow something that is silo biliteracy to be included as one of those mitigating circumstances related to specialty training, certifications, and other unique skills. And that should be applicable for any impacted position in a district. Ruth's letter is what policy looks like when it works. AMSEL would like to encourage this board to make Ruth's letter the template rather than just the exception. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hearing the bell, I know I have 1 second.
Go ahead.
I would say this, that we would like the DESI and the board to embrace the lenses, the multiple lenses sitting in this room today, and make this more than just a presentation, but begin to understand, visit the schools, visit the DEI programs, visit with teachers of color, understand the Ruth and others and the journeys that they've been on to be in the positions they're in. When COVID came, schools were districts were all over the place bringing in teachers of color. I mean, we just saw like hundreds of teachers of color being hired throughout the state. When COVID was over and folks struggled with the very MTEL that Jorge talked about, they cut them like that. No consideration. We brought them in. They talked about mentorship earlier. We brought them in. We knew when we were bringing them in that there may be some more work that needs to be done. Why don't we start working on that now so that when the time comes, we can continue to hire them? But districts, would lose, 40, 50% of the people of color that they hired during that period of time. And so when everybody begins to see things in multiple lenses and not just from their own, let's follow the rule book and the playbook and all this, and they start to see what it means to be Black and gay and disabled in all the other demographic variables that are not white mainstream, maybe they'll understand what it means to work with these children. And I heard my colleagues earlier talking about losing teachers. We cannot afford to lose another teacher of color, because all you got to do is look at the schools and see that kids of color are not going away. They need us. And white teachers who don't have the experiences with working with children of color, they need DEI support. They need to look at things differently as well. So we thank you very much for the opportunity. We wish we had more time.
Yeah.
We invite you and members of the board to come and visit us as well as the other groups here and have an extended conversation. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you so much
Peace.
for that. Thank you very much. Were there any questions from my colleagues? Dalida, Erica, did you have any?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Actually, I do. And it's for sorry, I missed the name. She talked about teachers from out of state, and she mentioned that, teach educators from Spain, but we don't have students from Spain. And then she mentioned how we benefit from teachers from other countries, but then not from other countries. So I would like to invite her to explain
That was
to
Laura. Yeah.
Hi,
Thank
this
you.
is Laura. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your question.
And we've heard this, we've had this raised in the past, so this is great. Keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
So
yeah, if you can maybe reframe it, or even like example of countries that we wish to have more educators from. I just wanted to get a little bit more clarity there.
For sure. So what I alluded to was that in Salem in particular, we do participate in the program that currently exists, where there's that exchange with teachers, but it's particularly from Spain. That's a program that's established through DESE. They provide all the sponsorship opportunities, and we could just go from what I understand, and we are assigned a number of teachers, but they again are particularly from Spain. In all of these efforts to recruit and retain in Salem, in the North Shore, we have challenges with trying to recruit educators of color from other communities because we're a small district. Other North Shore districts may be of a different size, but it's not many times where you see educators moving or relocating from Boston to the North Shore. It's often the other way around. So we struggled to try to find from our own community or within our state. So we had to think outside of the box and decided that because of the population that we serve, why not provide an opportunity for us to access an exchange program outside of what DESE offers? So we've started to recruit teachers from the Dominican Republic. We currently have 2, and we should have a 3rd one for the upcoming school year. And it's through the J1 visa program. That opportunity allows for us to hire teachers from the Dominican Republic, work with the Ministry of Education, and have our students have teachers from the communities that they are coming from. So I say that to invite the board to think about expanding beyond Spain, and for districts to have supports based on the communities that they serve. For Salem, it was important to have teachers from the Dominican Republic because our Latino population is from that country, but that doesn't mean that like Wellesley services a population from that's different than ours, right? What does that look like? Does Wellesley have an opportunity to hire teachers from international districts, right? So for us, it was important to think about who are we serving and what teachers do we want to put in front of our students. And through the J1 visa program, we've started to do that, but we'd love for that to be offered as an option through DESE.
Amazing. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I just wanted to add just 2 things. A similar program is also with Portugal, so for Portuguese speakers, where the demographic is, for the most part, is coming from Brazil or coming from Cape Verde. It's just kind of finding ways for those consulates to have a little more of a robust presence in our area, in our system, to allow us to kind of develop those programs. I had to admit that as a J1 recipient at some point in my journey, I wouldn't be here sitting in front of you if I didn't participate in an exchange program that brought me to the U.S.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to just, and thank you so much for being here. I wanted to just announce that we have another member of the board who is joining us online. Kristen, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Kristen Smitty. I live in Westfield, Mass. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Good. I'm glad you're able to make it. Do we have Isabella? Yep. Not yet. Yeah, okay, great. Well, she's finishing up classes in Hudson. Why don't we bring up the Massachusetts Teachers Association, please? Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Appreciate y'all. I think you have somebody on
We
Zoom
do.
with us today.
Dr. Oy is on Zoom as well.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here.
Ready? All right. Hi, good morning. My name is Beth Chapathy. I'm with the Center for Education Policy and Practice with the Massachusetts Teachers Association. And I'm joined today by Imani Sampson, who is a paraprofessional in Brookline and a member of the Brookline Education Association bargaining team, with Betsy Praval, who's a middle school educator in Cambridge and vice president, right, of the Cambridge Education Association, and Dr. Pitsame Oy from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, where she's associate professor of education, director at the Center for Asian American Studies, and leads up the, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry, the Asian American Educator Mentorship Program as well. I want to thank you for inviting us here today, and thank you to Carrie and Helene for helping to coordinate this today for us. This was super helpful. We also want to express our appreciation for the board's approval of the MTEL waivers at the April meeting, and I'm thrilled to say that our story we learned about from Wellesley about Ruth is not an isolated story. We've worked with dozens of educators in the last couple weeks who have closed the loop on the last of the requirements for their license application, secured licensure, and have been reappointed for the next school year. Several were facing termination due to a pending gap in their licensure, so this was an immediate rectification. And many of these educators were English learners coming from international programs, coming from preparation programs outside of the United States, who just struggled with that communication and literacy MTEL. As we've worked with members to work through the license requirements, we've also learned one of the big gaps is not only the MTEL tests, but the preparation materials available for the MTEL tests. There's a gap or perhaps a misalignment of the free resources available on the MTEL website and the actual testing experience. So one of our asks is if the department can look to those resources or work with the vendor to make sure that there's accurate and actionable resources to support educators as they work through the testing process. It's disheartening to refer folks to those resources to find that they get stuck when they come back and they say the test didn't look anything like the sample questions. It didn't look anything like I expected. And finally, you will hear from our members today about how they are working with their local associations, both at the bargaining table and collaboration with their leadership, both in the district and regionally, to build, support, and sustain mentorship programs for early career and career educators as well. So I'm going to pass this to Imani.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for this opportunity to speak. I want to apologize in advance. I'm not the most public speaker, but when
don't apologize.
But when it's things that are important, I push myself and really stretch my thinking to speak on things that are important. Thank you. So my name is Imani. I'm a paraprofessional over in Brookline. I'm wrapping up my 6th year as a paraprofessional, working in a specialized special education program. This is my first year kind of being very involved in the union, before I just kind of paid my dues. And so I work on our local contracts for all 3 of our units, and I'm also part of a JLMC, so it's a Joint Labor Management Committee that works on workforce diversity. And so we're really focused on standardizing reporting systems, recruitment, and then retention of diverse educators. So in the last 6 years, I've seen a lot of working conditions and professional pathways that are directly tied to recruitment and retention of educators. And we hear it all the time, we want our schools to represent the students and the students that we serve. And so I want to make sure that the process is actually like benefiting and actually supporting our educators of color. And right now there are a lot of barriers to that, like the cost of licensure, limited access to like preparation programs and like knowledge of preparation programs, and also like the real reality that going back to school in this economy will come at the expense of like what we can afford in our well-being. I'm just going to segue right into wages. We can't ignore the role that wages and working conditions play. A lot of paraprofessionals are our staff of color in many districts. And so like personally, I currently work 3 jobs just to stay in the district that I love. Last week I spoke up at negotiations about ESPs having to make like real life sacrifices, not even like thinking about like, oh, maybe I'll go back to school and like do X, Y, and Z, but like life sacrifices. For me personally, I went without health insurance for 2 years because even if I could afford to like scrape together the money to afford health insurance, I could not afford to use it. And so it was like, why pay for something? And even now I'm like, okay, I'm a little more of an adult. Like I'll pay for health insurance. I do not use it. Like it is not something that like I can fit into my budget to use on a day-to-day basis. It led to like a really unfortunate event in my household where my husband was experiencing some really hard challenges and symptoms. And I was just like, no, like we cannot afford it. And so I brought him like a glucose reader from Amazon. I'm so embarrassed to say it, but I'm like, we need to make sure before we like take on this expense that like there's something actually wrong. And his sugar was like 483. And even then, I'm like, okay, like I will drive you to the hospital. Like I looked it up, and an ambulance was like $650. I'm like, my district offered me $583 as a raise for the entirety of next school year. And so like, it really does get hard. He needs insulin now. The only reason I was actually able to afford the insulin is because my negotiation, my contract negotiation stipends came in like literally the day before, and so I was able to afford to like pay for like his first 6 weeks of insulin. And so like yes, like we want to like think ahead and like we want to do more in our schools, but like there are real barriers to that, and a part of that is like our wages. I went to college in Ohio because it was a little more affordable for me, and when I was thinking about what I'm going to do after college, I'm like, well, I definitely want to move back to Boston. Like, I'm a proud Boston Public Schools graduate. Like, I knew like this is where education is at. And so like I proudly moved back. I graduated in 2019. And like many others spoke about, I came in when diversity was like at a boom. Like I was just so proud to be in Massachusetts. I'm like, wow, like they are really supporting educators of color. Like there's so many programs, there were so many affinity groups. I just felt so welcomed and supported. And then as COVID sort of like started to die down, those experiences and those opportunities really left quickly. I'm in a district where our Office of Education Equity was closed down. And so now a lot of what we hear is like, oh, we could do some things, but there's no place to house it. We should be housing our equity like within our schools, within like our everyday being as educators. And so it's really hard to hear that like there's no space for it in our school districts. As far as like recruitment, I get really worried to recruit in this day and age just because I don't want to put my fellow like people of color in unsafe environments. And we're often, as paraprofessionals, we often recruit other paraprofessionals. And I can't in good conscience say without the right systems in place to protect my fellow educators of color, like yes, come to these districts, come work here. Because I can't guarantee that they'll be safe. I can't guarantee that they won't have microaggressions and microassaults. And simply bad experiences teaching while Black. Retention is like a really hard thing right now. in a district where I'm such a minority, I think just 2 years ago, I had a staff member come up to me and she gave me like this really arduous task. And she made a comment and said something along the lines of like, oh yeah, like I'm a slave master, I'm gonna whip you into shape. And in that moment, like my training and like how I present myself in environments, I had to restrain myself in my thoughts because I know that without the right reporting systems, my reaction is going to be weighed just as heavy as that person's comment. And so I did have to take time to step back and really think about what my next steps would be. And I did have a conversation, and they were very apologetic and willing to hear and learn more. But it really took me doing that extra work. And like I had to provide myself with that restorative justice. And that should just be like a standard among districts. And so, sorry, I'm just going through my notes. I wish that this was like an isolated incident. I wish that I could say like, oh yeah, like this is just a one-off thing. As paras, we do talk. And so one of the things that I did, just because I wanted my people to feel protected in our schools, is we had sort of like a forum and a workshop where we went through and we talked about microaggressions and assaults. And then we also talked about how you report them. And I just wanted to read a couple of instances just to like highlight the real urgency on what's going on. One paraprofessional said, as I printed materials for students, a teacher walked out of their classroom and handed me a math problem and challenged me to switch jobs with them. I was asked if my parents came over here legally or if they just came over and went through the process. When I was 6 months pregnant, I was asked how I would manage it, and it was assumed that I would be a single mother. Without the right avenues to report these type of things, it leaves paraprofessionals in a place where why would we invest the time and the money and the sacrifice to get these different licenses and to stay into communities when we're not being protected? And so I guess my ask for you all today is to just have like a standardized process. I'm not alone in this, and we shouldn't really have to cherry pick like, oh, this district is very progressive versus this district, you're not going to get any results from the incidents that you're having. And so we should all be able to go into any school district in Massachusetts and have a good experience where you feel belonging. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got to take a moment because you shared so much in yours that I know I resonated with, and I'm sure so many other people resonated with. So I just need to take a breath. So thank you for sharing. Okay. So my name is Betsy Praval, and in addition to being a veteran middle school educator in Cambridge and an elected union representative at the local, statewide, and national level, I am also a doctoral candidate at UMass Boston. My research centers the lived experience of Black adolescent girls receiving special education services, focusing on how resistance and resilience are demonstrated in their educational experiences. When an educator of color is entering the field of education, regardless if that educator is working in a district that's majority white, majority Black, majority Latinx or Latine, majority immigrant, the educator is entering a system that was not designed for them to thrive, nor was it designed for historically marginalized people to thrive. When we talk about diversity, we talk about having a workforce that is reflective of student populations. Literally, what do we see? And when in that context, what we see race. Yet within statewide and district policies and union contracts across the Commonwealth, the issue centered on race is often avoided. It's watered down into broader diversity inclusion language, which trends towards color evasive rhetoric in education policies and guidelines. Districts cannot hold spaces for racial affinity groups for educators. Part of my role as in Cambridge as a union leader, through the CEA, we created the Educators of Color Coalition, and through that, we had racial affinity groups in trying to partner with the district to have, joint labor management collaboration. We then get notification from legal that, oh, we can't use that language. So what ended up happening was that the language had to be changed to employee resource groups. So again, you start getting more like watered down language. Educators of color often have to look outside of their own districts to find authentic, healing, and joyful spaces. Shout out Teachers Lounge. DESE can support the development of communal spaces for educators of color to be in community with one another to further develop our professional practices. We're often restricted to in-district PDs, and quite frankly, they do not serve us. Mentorship for educators of color cannot be restricted to in-district opportunities. DESE can support statewide mentorship programs, pairing programs for young educators of color with a veteran educator of color working in a similar discipline. Mentorship does not stop within the first few years of an educator's career. When opportunities for leadership and advancement are available for educators of color, DESE can support their longevity and effectiveness through multiracial leadership cohort models. As a classroom educator, I hear the word accountability a lot, like a lot. And as previous speakers have mentioned, I want to reiterate the importance of collecting and disseminating data regarding hiring, retention, and dismissal of educators of color. And DESE can support that by having a transparent database, network, what have you, public on their website. Where are educators entering into the system? How long are they staying in the system? When are they leaving and under what circumstances are they leaving? Is it as my former principal, shout out Manuel Fernandez, I know he already left though, why are they leaving within that first 1 to 2, 3 years before getting professional status? The bottom line is, as individuals, as educators of color, we experience tokenization and marginalization on a day-to-day basis. And if DESE really, really wants to get behind us and support us, it's not gonna be on a piecemeal, individualized basis. It is systemic, and it's going to be a long fight.
Thank you. I know we have another colleague, but we're really short on time. But Behitsame Oy, do you want to say very quickly something before I have to move us along?
Yes, I'm just gonna lots of things that has been said already. So the echoing ask is we would love to see on our fund from the Asian American Pacific Islander is more data disaggregation, right? So when people talk about educators of color, it's going to be different in different districts. So if we could get a scorecard or a report card of the Board of Higher Ed to talk about what districts have the data disaggregation, because you can look at Boston and you're going to get different demographics than Acton, Boxborough, right? That's where you're going to see 31% of Asian American students. But which type of Asian students are there? Because I'm in Lowell, so you're going to get Southeast Asians. So that means you're going to get Southeast Asian refugees. We have also, we settle refugees every week. So our school district deals with new refugees, right? Versus ones that are already established. So we would love to see a diversity report card coming from DESE. highlighting which districts are doing a good job, what are their retention rates, who are they serving. We would also love to see where are the resources that you have available for educators of color, like the Asian American Pacific teachers. Where are the curricular resources? Because you just heard my colleague said that the professional development, if you're in a district where you are the only Asian American in Pittsfield, in the South Shore, and everything is going to be white centric, right? So then the Asian students in those districts are not going to see themselves. So that's called epistemological racism and erasure. And so resources, report card, and then also you heard so many amazing stories today from educators of color. Why not start a digital storytelling where it is on your website, highlighting the impact of the Teachers Lounge, highlighting the impact of AMSIL, highlighting the impact of your Student Advisory Council so that people can see what's happening, because there's amazing things happening in silos. We just don't know about it. And so if you could do anything, walk the talk, pay the people who are doing the work, but highlighting their stories, but do it systematically, do it and also have it aligned with each of the communities that you are serving. And I also want to do a shout out for the communities who are engaging, communities who work like Minnesota in Lowell. There are over 100 Cambodian families whose children are English language learners and also designated as students with disabilities. So there are communities who have intersectional identities and needs that needs to be teased out. And those haven't been said because when we aggregate so much that it gets lost in the translation, literally, because there is no Khmer speaking. Any of our information that you have on your website is also not translated. And then you have the things about Google Translate. Some languages gets lost in translation and are not appropriate for the communities themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any follow-up from my colleagues, Erica, Dalida, or Kristen, before we move on? Well, I want to thank you all. Very powerful stories we're hearing today. I'm sorry that we have to roll along and just, get to the next thing, but I do appreciate this, and it's a lot to hear. It's a lot to think about and consider, and it makes an impact. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
You may follow up with a letter as well.
Yeah, please feel free to follow up. That's fine.
Thank you, membership.
You're welcome. I'm going to ask the American Federation of Teachers, Massachusetts, to come forward next, and look forward to hearing your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much. I apologize. Leah and I are online, and Sarah is there in person with us. But the three of us will be
That's what it
takes. Giving some quick presentations as well. So my name is Jessica Tang, and I have been a middle school teacher in Boston Public Schools, teaching social studies and humanities since 2004. Leigh, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of get into our presentations, if that's okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Serena, and I am the Vice President of the Boston Teachers Union and previously taught in Boston Public Schools as well.
Thank you, and welcome to you both.
And Sarah?
Yep. I am Sarah Wolford. I'm the Director of Policy and Programming with AFT Massachusetts. Also a former Boston Public Schools teacher, 10 years, middle and high school math mostly.
Great. Thank you for being here.
So we have elementary, middle school, and high school all represented here. And we are drawing heavily on our Boston experience, although Sarah's going to be sharing, more national policy recommendations as well, based on research. But I'll just share, for me, this topic is something I've literally been working on my whole career. The Boston Public Schools used to actually have a teacher diversity work group. And I myself and our political director at the Boston Teachers Union, who at that time was president of the Black Educators Alliance, and I served on it as co-chair of the Massachusetts Asian American Educators Association, have done this work for a really long time. And I think we are sharing a lot of what we did in Boston, because if you look at the data, Boston disproportionately actually counts for the highest percentage of educators of color from the state. So BPS alone actually accounts for, I think it's actually over 30% now of the state's educators of color. Looking at some data from the last few years, 46% of all the Black teachers, 20% of all the Latinx teachers, and 24% of all the Asian teachers in the whole state. And so I think that we've been doing a lot that has been working. And at both the BTU and AFT Mass, we've had a long, I think, history of learning. So, for example, the Boston Teachers Union was an early partner of the JET program, which was one of the very first, parent-to-teacher programs before the Bilingual Education Accelerated Community to Teaching program, which currently has been very successful in the pipeline of recruiting educators of color into the district. As others have shared, those parent-to-classroom, community-to-classroom pipelines have been really important. We've also engaged early with the recruitment, cultivation, diversity team before it expanded to a full department, and have been a partner for, actually dating myself, but decades now, to share ideas and support pathway partnerships, and then including also the initial high school to teacher program. And the very first student that did that program actually is now a Boston Public School teacher and interned with us over the summer, which was something that we were trying out and piloting. And actually that the student asked to intern with us that summer, and we had a lot of learnings, and they interned with them, some of the summer school teachers. But we've also used our contract negotiations to try to improve the policies to help both recruit and retain educators of color. So, for example, we had in our contract MTEL supports to help the educators who are having a challenge passing this. And Leigh, I think, is going to share a little bit more of her story and what happened there, which is very common. And we also secured contract language that extends the time needed to get the licensure, that increases also the reimbursements to cover the cost of the tests, because previously BPS didn't reimburse the tests, which are expensive. We've also initiated a lot of the MCAS supports, connecting educators of color and prospective parents to get to MCAS supports and in those pipelines, as well as help getting, the supports for passing the tests. And we even had a whole year of our educator policy program, where specifically the topic of the fellowship was increasing teacher diversity. We've also partnered with RCD programs for the Educators of Color Night. Leah was instrumental in making those events possible, and offered peer assistance and review. We've worked with professors like Travis Bristol, who's Associate Professor of Teacher Education and Ed Policy at UC Berkeley School of Education. And, that work, I think, was specifically looking at Black educators in BPS. And there's a lot of learnings there as well, and I can actually link the study. But essentially, if you are the only Black person in a Black male in a school, you had different challenges than if you were in a group. But interestingly, some of the what he called loners would stay because of actually the working conditions. And that is an important piece of this puzzle, is that when we recruit, we also need to look at the supports and the actual working conditions of the teachers in a school. And that actually played a big part in retention. And so I'm going to pause there because I want to make sure that Leah and Sarah are able to share their experiences and recommendations as well. And then I will kind of end with some of the other pieces of specific policy that we really think are underutilized in the state. Well,
Sounds awesome. Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as Jessica stated, I was formerly a Boston Public School educator, am an educator on leave, and before that I was a Boston Public School and Brockton High School student. I became a teacher because of the powerful educators of color I had. And I did not realize how rare it was to have educators of color in Massachusetts until I became a teacher myself. Because of the teachers I had, I left school proud of my natural hair, my melanin, and my identity. And they taught me that not only academics, but belonging. I returned to teach at my old elementary school because I understood the power of students seeing themselves reflected in their teachers. And I know that my story, like others, almost did not happen. I have literally wanted to teach since was playing school with my teddy bears in kindergarten, but I sit here having failed my MTELs multiple times, carrying significant student debt, having more than once been the only educator of color in a building, and being labeled for having an attitude or being too loud. I've also received a needs improvement on my evaluation, directly tied to the advocacy that I did for my students. Despite working multiple jobs, earning multiple licenses, and fighting my way as a single teen mom back to teach at the school and for the city that raised me, I almost left the profession. And unfortunately, I know that my story is not unique, although my own. In 25-26 school year, Boston Public School had 710 educators on waivers, and almost 2/3 of them were educators of color. In the last 5 years that I have worked at the Boston Teachers Union, members are reporting not having a sense of belonging, harmful climates, and lack of leadership opportunities. Educators of color often report isolation and feeling unsupported or targeted. As a union, I hear about the macroaggressions, disproportionate discipline and harsher evaluation, invalid hiring structures, and school climates where educators are expected to represent diversity, but are not always included in leadership or decision making. Additionally, we look at school closures in Boston Public Schools and we see that educators are at these school closures disproportionately. I have filed numerous grievances around evaluations for educators of color, and in fact, in the latest evaluation cycle that was just released this past week, 46% of educators receiving a needs improvement were educators of color. We know that negative evaluations and punitive systems can become barriers to retention instead of opportunities for growth. Too often, educators experience investigations and discipline without restorative support, coaching, and mentorship. And all of these things matter, especially the pathways. I know that I sit here as a former educator, still believe that I'm an educator, haven't gone through programs like the Woman Educator of Color that Boston Public Schools used to have. I went to a student teacher pipeline in Brockton Public Schools, and I also was involved and inspired Educator of Color Fellowship through DESE. When these pathways disappear, retention suffers. As a union, we want to partner with families, communities, and stakeholders to advance equity in education. Families understand the value of representation. They want schools where children see themselves and feel understood. And at the Boston Teachers Union, we partner with coalition organizations, affinity groups, and families to advocate for shared governance through sustained programming like community schools, equitable hiring through school site councils, sharing student relief information, advocating for relationship support, and supporting pathways to education in combination with powerful partners like the Educator Diversity Act. Teacher diversity cannot be treated as just a hiring initiative. It must be community work. We need to pass and fully support policies like the Educator Diversity Act, and we need to support scholarships, loan forgiveness, and multiple pathways to licensure that value field experience and education preparation, not just expensive testing barriers. We need accountability in hiring, transparency around evaluations and discipline, restorative systems that support growth, and funded mentorship and leadership programs that retain educators of color once they enter our schools. Because the truth is, we cannot recruit our way out of environments we refuse to change. If we truly want diversity in our educator workforce, we must create schools where educators of color aren't simply hired, but where they belong, lead, and stay. Because once our educators thrive, so do our students.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah. That was beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Thanks. Nice touch.
I'm biased, but that's okay. So although I could spend, I think, some time speaking about my personal experience and delve into the Educator Diversity Act, I like to elevate a significant amount of research and data that was done by the National Center on Teacher Equality and CTQ, including their State of States report from 2023 and a number of other various diversity brief articles that have been published in the last year or two. The State of the States article in 2023, written by Abigail Swisher, highlighted their analysis covered 4 different key categories for state action in terms of building teacher diversity. Their analysis looked at building the pipeline of future teachers of color, which Leah and various colleagues have also mentioned. This took the look of grow your own, high school apprenticeships, i.e. paid apprenticeships, and then teacher prep with minority institutions and HBCUs. It also included an analysis of offering incentives to attract candidates of color through scholarships and loan forgiveness, and support and retain and develop teachers of color through pathways like this and others. And lastly, it looked at using data to set goals and track progress. From this analysis, there were about 6 or 7, I think, key things that were elevated by this report about what states can do to help effectively build, or to help build effective teacher pipelines, diverse teacher pipelines. That includes support and monitor the retention of current teachers of color through various data or data dashboards. I believe while many states collect teacher diversity data, few actually set goals and track progress publicly. Only 7 states, Massachusetts is not one of them, publicly set their goals, similar to, I believe, what the educator from the MTA shared, a visual dashboard of some sort that could sort of show the impact and the investment, I think, that the department is showing. So going back to what states can do, invest in improving school climate and leadership, support districts to improve hiring and human resource functions, engage teachers of color in policymaking, set explicit goals to diversify the workforce and publish more data to track progress of those goals, commit funding to this priority with an explicit focus on racial equity, and then finally our own, minimize disproportionate impact of layoffs on teachers of color by granting professional status before the 4th year. A Ron Noble article written in 2024, also highlighted on the National Center for Teacher Diversity, revealed actually a troubling trend. The racial diversity of teacher workforce is growing at a slower pace than the racial diversity of college-educated adults. What does this mean? This means that this trend indicates that increasingly Black and brown adults who earn college degrees are either choosing other professions or electing to leave the classroom altogether. So is teaching losing its appeal from people from historically disadvantaged groups? We know teacher diversity matters to all students, especially students of color, and many states and districts have been trying to reach that goal. So why is this the case? Low pay and status could be elevated or could be shown. Other professional degrees requiring a college degree don't nearly have the same pay or status. I can share actually a beautiful article written that discusses, I think, the status of teachers and teacher pay in Finland, where specific things talked about how the teaching profession is one that should be elevated and respected in a way that is not necessarily shown here. I won't go into detail. I can share additional pieces in regards to what sort of some of the research that the National Center on Teacher Quality elevated, and I can share those 3 or 4 different articles with you all. Yeah. I believe they also elevated what are Texas and California doing, since they have significant teacher diversity numbers that outpace the national average. Because of time, I am going to kick it back to Jessica.
Thank you.
And we'll go from there.
Yes, I'd be very interested in seeing all of those reports you mentioned. Jessica.
All right, I can't see the timer, so I don't know how much time we have left, but I'll just briefly, share that, summarizing, there is a lot of a body of research of what works. We've seen it successfully implemented. Unfortunately, particularly with budget cuts and the fiscal crisis, we're seeing a lot of the whole departments or positions that are no longer actually going to be with us for this next year even. And just also wanted to mention, Leah reminded me that we did actually the Boston Teachers Union Commission report over 10 years ago, looking at the disproportionate impact of negative evaluations. And the study did find that evaluators disproportionately were targeting older educators of color, particularly older Black educators of color, and older multilingual educators of color too. And this actually then resulted in a whole series of trainings for evaluators in Boston Public Schools, where they had to get racial bias and implicit bias training. And so that is one piece. Again, the pathways programs, the retention, recruitment, the MTEL pieces are all really important. And then something that Sarah mentioned on the early permanent status, school districts can already do this, and they're not utilizing giving educators of color early professional status. When I first started teaching, I got permanent status after my first year. I did not have to wait till my fourth year. And, I asked my principal why, because I was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. He's like, well, I don't want to lose you in case we have layoffs. And so this is a current tool that administrators can use that I think is really underutilized. But overall, again, when you have sustainable working conditions and working environments.
There's just one final data point, or I can email it to you.
Hang on. I think we can take it. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. In regards to the interest in teaching, this was a data point that was elevated by the state of Texas. A 2023 study looked at a question on Texas centralized college application form that asked college applicants of all races whether they would seek teacher certification or would they like to become a teacher. And so in a recent article, researchers noticed that while overall interest in teaching declined significantly over a decade, it was not because of a lack of interest in the profession. In fact, of the individuals surveyed and showing interest in teaching, approximately 45% were people of color, which closely mirrors the share of all college applicants of color. Highlighting the fact that potential teachers of color are lost later on in the path between entry into college and entry into the classroom. And so yet another, I think, data point that we could potentially massage or potentially look at as we're exploring where are the key opportunities to sort of, I think, identify teachers of a color interested in the profession and capitalize upon those.
Nice. Okay, great. Thank you.
And I just want to thank also, I see Darcy in the room that we've been able to.
We have Darcy Fernandez and Liz Losi from the department are here listening in. Liz has been here since the beginning. Darcy came in a little bit ago and have heard a lot, and I'm really grateful to them for being here.
And we appreciate the opportunity to speak and share experiences and such too. And then I have to give one little last shout out to Leia. Leia said she struggled with the MTEL test, etc. But what she didn't mention, she's also an award-winning teacher and a finalist for the MABESE Educator of the Year. And so I think that's important to uplift because, the tests don't tell us everything about teacher quality.
That's fantastic. And congratulations on the little one there. And we're very excited.
Thank you.
Kristen, or I don't know if Erica is still on, but if Erica or Kristen or Dalida have anything else to add?
Erica's not on, but Isabella is.
Okay, great. Well, I was going to ask if Isabella was ready to come aboard. Thank you, AFT. Really appreciate y'all being here. Sarah, Leah, and Jessica. Really appreciate your time and your stories. Thank you. And yeah, Isabella, come on in.
Okay, hi everyone. I apologize. My the video camera on this computer doesn't work. I just had to give away my school computer back to my school as graduation comes up, so I'm using my grandparents' computer instead.
Congratulations, and we can listen to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I'll introduce myself again. I'm Isabella Chamberlain. I'm the student representative to the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the chair of the State Student Advisory Council, as well as co-chair to one of our lower regional councils. Obviously, today I'll be speaking to the student perspective when it comes to educator diversification. The way that we structured this was at just recently, we had our last State Student Advisory Council meeting, and we created a little, what's the word for it, template for the students to fill out with the questions or prompts that were provided to us previously on the invitation email. And so we just had the students that were there fill those out. So everything that I'll be sharing is from the students.
Nice.
We also have students from across Massachusetts, I think, that were represented in these responses. I think the only area, actually, no, I think we had everywhere but Western Mass. represented in these responses. So I'll just get started and go through this quickly. So the first question was how students experience educator diversity in their schools and districts. Every single response that we got, except for one, unfortunately said that they don't experience a lot of diversity in their schools and in their districts. A lot of students shared that they may have one or two teachers that are teachers of color, but that majority of their teachers are usually white. But a lot of the students did share that they do have a good balance between female and male teachers. It's really just when it comes to the ethnicity or the race of the teachers, it's not very diverse. The only response that was shared was from Southeast Massachusetts that said that they did think that they had a very diverse community, and that they do think that they have diverse educators. But they did share that some of the sectors in their school and districts are lacking in diversity, but others are not. So the next question was, sorry, one second. Next question was, what supports or conditions help students feel represented, included, and connected? A lot of the things that students shared were leadership in their school, so student groups helping have their voices being heard, students just seeing teachers who look like them or seeing the holidays that they celebrate being represented, or having other students that look like them. Um, Other cultural representations, so having like events where their music is shared, even just their flags are shared, or having people there that look and sound like them. Having clubs in school, sports at school. Another person shared being able to talk to just their guidance counselors. Um, One student shared that they have let me see, they have certain clubs in their school that offer therapy sessions. And they also have a women's club where a lot of girls are able to go and share their experiences just being women. So that kind of ties into other students who said that clubs and sports at their school help them feel supported. Um, but in general, that's mainly what the students shared. So just having clubs, sports, counselors there to support them, teachers being able to check up on the students, um, student government, and then also culturally inclusive curriculum where students are able to see themselves and what they learn. Then the next question was, how do students perceive the impact of educator diversity on learning, belonging, and school climate? Mainly, some of the things that they shared was having more educator diversity allows students of different races and ethnicity backgrounds to feel actually comfortable at their school because there's other familiar faces in their environment, where some environments can be tough for some students. They feel more welcome in their classrooms, more comfortable speaking with certain teachers of similar backgrounds. Um, and a lot of other students shared specifically um, that them and their peers perceive that diversity is incredibly necessary, and that in a school where they don't have a lot of diversity, they'd like to see more. Um, One student said, as a Black student, it would be nice to have someone the same because my school struggles with acceptance. So I think mainly here, what was shared is that students incredibly do benefit from seeing educators or just people in their school from their same background because they can connect to them. And it's also great to just have diversity in general because students who aren't from those backgrounds are able to learn from those educators and from those staff. And it's obviously disheartening to hear from certain students who replied that their school is not diverse and they would really love to have it become more diverse because it would help them incredibly. And then the last question was, more open-ended, just opportunities for stronger student-educator community partnership in this work. And what a lot of the students said was just strengthening connections between communities that are already present, as well as making students known of what opportunities are available to them in their communities. Another student mentioned more clubs and events, like I spoke to before. They also mentioned mental health awareness, which I think ties into the student who talked about therapy sessions and having counselors to speak to. And then two students talked about just having their teachers engage with their students more and truly get to know them. And I think in a lot of schools that does happen. So I think a lot of the perspectives that are shared are obviously specific to the schools that they're in. But I still, obviously, it's still incredibly important. And let me see, is there anything else? Yeah, I think that was mainly what they said there. So, strengthening existing connections, letting them know about what opportunities are available, and just strengthening connections not only in the community but also at the more smaller level. So, in the schools between student to student or between teachers and students, staff and students. Um, and yeah, I think that was all of the questions that were provided. And then we had the students answer.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Any follow-up? Dalida, Kristen? No.
No, not at this moment.
Okay. All right. Well, Isabella, I really thank you so much for joining us today. And I guess at this point, I just want to well, I have a question. I'm not going to put Liz and Darcy on the spot to like respond to things that were said and heard today, but I know that at our last meeting, we had the Office of Planning and Research and Planning, and I had a lot of questions, which I didn't follow up with yet, but I will. But it's interesting, I'm just curious if you hear this a lot, if you see this in the research. A lot of what we heard, I guess this goes into the whole discussion part, which is, hearing that mentorship and leadership, a sense of belonging or transparency around timelines for opportunities for educators. These seem to be very common shortcomings and that educators are facing, and the notion of having a website that is much more dynamic in terms of digital storytelling and that type of thing, or a visual dashboard, is really exciting to think about, because it seems like we could do a whole lot more. But I'm just curious if you have heard some of these comments that we heard today, and just
I'm happy to say that some of the comments we heard today we're trying to embed in the projects we're doing here at DESE, but they're at a small scale.
Sure.
That's the problem. So for example, the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program,
Yeah.
we have a community group for that, so that, because a big part of that is diversifying the workforce.
Right.
And so we have a community group for those individuals to come together, talk, and work through that process. We are also currently putting in place the diversity plans that are part of the Mass Leads Act. And what we are doing is we're pulling out from surveys from the schools, what is it that you need for PD to expand some of that? And Boston is right that they've been a model for some of that work, so we're looking to see how we can use some of these individuals to uplift with PD across the state in this regard. And the other thing that we did, even with the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program, is we used the data to see where the largest gaps were between teachers of color and students of color. And besides large gaps, that's where we actually focused our attention for the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship Program. So we went from 7 schools, I think we're now going to be at 12, and we continue to target those that have the largest gaps. So we are definitely looking at that research. We are supporting that research. The question really becomes, and I'll say it again, is getting it to scale requires a budget. And
Sure.
one of the things we're running into is we at one point got $10 million that was spread across multiple years to do some of this work. That's all gone now. And so we're doing the best we can with what we have. But to get to the level that these people are talking about is going to require more funding and more partnership with groups that really have a background in this cultural divide. And that's going to be extremely important.
Yeah, I was really taken by the comment about providing, having DESE provide more of a statewide opportunity for professional development for educators of color when there's, just pockets of diversity happening in some school districts. And it's not in all districts. And then it also raises the question around how do you prepare communities for more diversity in the schools, in the educator pipeline, in the education in classrooms. So it seems like, there's a lot more to process. I admit there's a lot that I'm just reacting to some of the things that I heard because I was jotting down similar words. And I know there's a lot more going on here, but I want to open it up to Dalida and Kristen as well, if there's any other comments in here around what we heard today, if you want to add to any of that.
I guess for me, a lot of what was said really resonated. There were a lot of individual stories about, how folks have had different experiences across the state. But there's one of the themes that kind of stood out to me was that there's this perceived lack of feedback loop. And I feel like perhaps for the first time, folks are bringing things to the table or feeling like there's maybe a way to get some of these concerns addressed, and perhaps there are opportunities for feedback that people aren't aware of, or but I did hear that we need to strengthen connections, we need to have more datas and more systems, and even when I just heard Darcy say we need to scale it, to me that translates as it's not systematic yet, because if we can't scale it, it's not part of our system. It's just and I'm not criticizing Darcy at all. I think that the work that is being done is valuable, but how do we make it systemic, or how do we support that? Because without the systems piece, it's just going to continue to happen in pockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
I agree to everything Kristen said. I also heard loud and clear this invitation for us to be able to seek feedback on the ground, right? That those who testified today they're not speaking on behalf of all the educators, and there's a lot more stories. So even thinking about that piece of how do we systemize feedback in a way that is inclusive, in a way that is not restrictive to coming to DESE or just attending a Zoom once in a blue moon, right? That just passed, by the way. And truly seeking the feedback and engaging with educators on the ground, so we can continue to, just systemize everything and scale everything, as Darcy mentioned.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really animates my interest and, just wanting to be part of this committee is the fact that it is an ongoing process. That this law is not, doesn't stop. It doesn't stop at the end of the year. It doesn't stop at the end of fiscal year, whatever. It's a continuous cycle, and it will continue to be, we'll be revisiting and looking and improving as we go over the years, and which is what it's going to take. Everything, working in a cycle, and getting these feedback, getting whatever it is going to be, but just getting the information together and really trying to hear from people on a regular basis. And this was just an opening, to kind of pair with what we did in April, to hear from others and getting their perspective from stakeholders as well. So I think that's been really, really helpful. While we're here and we have a quorum, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from that April meeting.
So moved.
And a
Second.
Yes, thank you. And I guess we do have to do a roll call, so I'm going to ask Helene to come forward and um, take that part for us, lead that piece.
Member Rasha?
Yes.
Member Smitty?
Yes.
Member Stewart?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you so
unanimous
much.
vote, your motion passes.
The minutes are approved unanimously. Exciting. So I just, as we wrap up, unless there are any other comments from either of you.
I guess I just wanted to know, I was also inspired at hearing like the innovative practices happening in pockets. And I wish there was a way to share those like more like wide scale, like the project that's going on in Salem where they're like reaching out to the Dominican Republic. Like that's really cool. And I wish I had known more about that as a superintendent because I was trying to do something similar with supporting an educator in district and I was just banging my head against the wall. So I feel like there's if we could elevate the cool innovative things happening to get around a lot of the barriers, I would love to try to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I thought of you when they were talking about that because it's something you've mentioned in the past as well, and I don't remember if anyway, I think that's just one example. Yeah, there were many. Sorry.
One of the things I'd recommend is we have put out close to $8 million in teacher diversification funds to districts from across the state. Welcoming them in to talk about how they've been doing that work is important. Salem was one of those school districts
Nice.
where they came up with this whole notion of bringing in people from the Dominican Republic. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because then you could hear directly from them, and we have a cohort of schools who have uplifted and made some of those changes. One of which that I shout out to has had the largest shift is Chelsea Public Schools. And so we could get to you that list of school districts and maybe invite them to talk a little bit about what is some of the work you've been doing and how have you been able to put that into place as a way to get some of that information Kristen's looking for.
Were those the 7 districts that you talked about previously that you're referring?
No,
No, that's something else. Okay. Okay.
This is for the teacher diversification grant that we've offered for the last 5 years.
Okay, great.
And so, and there's a cohort of districts who have been involved in it in multiple years and have begun to see some changes from those efforts. So I think it would be good to have them come and speak as well.
Great. So we can think about that for next year. I think we haven't really talked about any dates for next year, but we can certainly do that. I don't have any dates to propose for next year, but I think we can probably do that in September when we come back and just kind of, have a meeting where we can just kind of figure out who we would want to hear from and some follow-up and then get some dates on the calendar for the year. Now that we've gone through this for the past 6 months, we kind of have a sense maybe of what we need to do and what we want to avoid in terms of logistics and certain things. So a lot to think about, but I really just want to thank everybody, all of our speakers who joined us this afternoon. I think their insights and their lived experience and clarity have really helped to ground the committee's work and what's real, what's happening in classrooms and communities and the daily lives of educators and students across the Commonwealth. And I think that really helps us to carry this work forward. And I look forward to doing more of this next year, next school year. I think what we heard today, it's a through line. Educator diversity, it's not abstract. It's not an abstract goal. That it needs to be more transparent. People need to understand what's happening. They need, certainly educators of color need more support on the ground. It's felt in belonging and representation and climate, in pathways that open or close, and in whether people feel seen and supported in their work. It's also shaped by the policy choices, the ones we make, the ones we delay, the ones that we fail to notice. I think as a committee, our responsibility is to carry these perspectives forward with integrity and identify what follow-up information we need, what questions remain, what recommendations, if any, that we might need to bring before the full board, in time, over time. And I think, you know, today's testimony will directly inform a lot of that work going forward. So again, thanks to everybody for your time and your presence and your partnership, and the committee members as well for everything, for your thoughtful engagement. And with that, I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for being here. Thank you.